when the Among Us opportunity came up, at first we thought that's just a 2D game with a lot of little typing. And well, what if we brought it into 3D? And we started to realize two things. First of all, that in Among Us, you do a lot of tasks around the spaceship, and that, okay, we can make those very physical, right? But then really, really important is Among Us is a game about
Welcome to a new episode of XR AI Spotlight, the show that gives the stage to the founders and makers pushing the boundaries of XR and AI. My name is Gabriele Romagnoli, I'm your host, and I'm here today with Jesse Schell. Jesse is the CEO of Schell Games, a studio of more than 150 people with an impressive track record.
We've been in business for, 22 years at this point. One of my proudest things is 22 years, 0 layoffs in that period of time. And a lot of that comes from being ready to lean with the market. We think of ourselves as kind of in 4 different businesses. We do entertainment games, we do educational games, we also do health games, and then we do theme park and museum work.
Some of the greatest successes include Among Us VR or the I Expect You to Die trilogy. And today, we will dive into what was the driving design principle when creating immersive experiences that stick with users.
If you're serious about doing mixed reality, if you're serious about doing virtual reality, the key thing is always to start with because that's the point of the medium.
How Schell Games got affected by the changes in the Meta Store.
It's interesting watching Meta's approaches. The thing we know is that once the doors are thrown wide, discoverability becomes really hard. The thing that is unknown, I think, about where the Quest Store is going to end up is we don't know, will it end up like
how he sees AI impacting the way we make and play games.
AI changes things so much because historically with video games, everything's about below the net. Run, jump, punch, kick, all things you do with your below the net. And we're about to move into this zone where not only can it understand my speech, but it can actually understand my emotional context.
And why we don't have a killer app for XR just yet.
We've watched people chase, what is that killer app for augmented reality for years, and nobody's quite found it. I have 2 theories about it.
But before we get into it, I wanted to thank our sponsor Meshy, who made this episode possible. Meshy is a real powerhouse for generating 3D assets with AI. You can start with a simple text or image prompt and get high-quality stylized 3D models in just a minute. There are 2 features that completely blew my mind. One is the ability to create stylized texture for any mesh, with or without UV. And the other is the ability to edit portions of AI-generated textures like in Midjourney in Painting. The team has been pushing continuous updates, improving significantly the geometry and texture quality, and I strongly encourage you to visit meshy.ai and check out the generous free plan. After that, make sure to use the code XRAI20 to get a 20% discount on your subscription. And now, it's time to roll the title and welcome Jesse under the spotlight. So, Jesse, it is a real pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, glad to be here today.
So, Jesse, a lot of people are asking about mixed reality, and I would like to learn your personal impression. Where do we stand right now with mixed reality, and has it lived up to your expectation?
Yeah, mixed reality has definitely gone down the path I expected it was going to go down. Let's see. And by that, what I mean is we're seeing the dominance of video pass through for mixed reality applications. So we see that on the Quest. We see that with the Apple Vision Pro. I started thinking about that probably 8 or 9 years ago. I think I saw the first Totem demo, which was the company that Apple Vision Pro, that Apple bought, that I believe was kind of the anchor around which the Apple Vision Pro was built. And I remember seeing it and thinking, oh, this is absolutely where it's going. When you hold that up against the HoloLens, the Magic Leap, and other optical pass-through choices, it's a very different experience because of the nature of the edges. People don't think about the importance of the edge in mixed reality. If I can see beyond the edge of what's actually displayed, it completely ruins the immersion. And video pass-through doesn't have that problem. Not to mention the fact that video pass-through can just be so much cheaper and more powerful. So for, in the 20 teens, I was very much believing that, 2020s are going to be the decade of video pass-through. And then I think the 2030s are probably going to be the decade of optical pass-through.
So you mentioned about a technical perspective, right, of what is capable of delivering. But when, of course, you have worked and your team has worked on several mixed reality experience, I expect you to dive
Oh.
in one. What do you think from the content perspective, the type of experiences, both from entertainment or maybe education? What's your thought there?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, the problem that augmented reality has is a killer app problem. Virtual reality, the killer app is obvious. It's games. But with augmented reality, it's not really clear what the killer app is. And the killer app can never be dismissed. No technology without a killer app succeeds. And we've watched people chase, like, what is that killer app for augmented reality for years, and nobody's quite found it. And I think that's going to continue to be an issue. I have two theories about it. One is, I think that for adults, the killer app is likely going to be productivity, and specifically when you can do telepresence. So instead of having a Zoom meeting, a person can actually appear to be in your room, making eye contact with you, having a normal human conversation. I think that's probably what the killer app is for adults. But my less popular point of view is that I believe that mixed reality is predominantly a children's medium. Um, Children like to play in the real world, and they like to play in a very physical way. And so as a result, I really believe that, and I believe we're going to see this over the next 5 years leading into 2030. I think we're going to start to see that mixed reality is going to be most popular with children. One of the secrets of the Quest headsets is they work phenomenally well outside. If you've checked out games like Spatial Ops and tried to play them outside, like, it works really, really well.
And I was actually very surprised by it because I've always had the impression that maybe sun might have like interfere or maybe like such a big open space. Instead, it is true. It is actually very robust experience even outside.
Yeah. Now I'll say that, Meta gives you warnings about, hey, don't do that. And my understanding is I I believe that's largely for legal reasons. They don't want you running out into the street or falling in a hole or any of those things. But I suspect people are going to kind of overcome those concerns, and I think we're going to see um, that. My guess is that we're in 2025 right now. That by 2030, I think the dominant use of mixed reality will be children's play. We'll see. We'll see if that's true. But that said, I mean, I do think the one of the real strengths of the video pass through is the fact that you can have strong VR experiences and strong AR experiences with the same headset. And so I think we're going to see a lot of people who are getting a VR headset for one reason and then maybe using it for another. Maybe they get a VR headset because they wanted to do a fitness app, but then they saw, oh wow, there's some kind of cool pass-through games that are kind of casual that I kind of like, and maybe I'll do that too. So I think we're going to start to see some broadening and widening there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has a lot of value that you can bring both, and you're not limited by the transparency, for example, that you get on these augmented reality glasses, or maybe the field of view as well. So
Yeah.
that certainly makes a difference. I do have a question regarding a bit you and your role now at Shell Games, right? As the
Yeah, yeah,
CEO,
yeah.
as someone that is like, I feel very deep creative. I mean, writing a book about the art of game design. I was curious to hear a bit from you. How much are you involved still in the design, in the production of the experiences, and if maybe you can also share some lessons that you have learned with other teams that might be also keep trying to build mixed reality games.
Sure. Let's see. So Shell Games is typically working on about 8 projects at a time. So I can't be deeply involved in them. But I am able to kind of provide guidance. Often I'll initiate projects, kind of get things going in a certain direction. And there are some projects I'm able to kind of lean in on and provide some creative support. So it's kind of it depends on the project. Some projects, like, whoa, they're doing great, they need very little from me. And then other ones I'm like, oh, okay, I think I could be helpful here, and I'll lean in a bit.
Mhm.
So I lean in a bit selectively. But yeah, no, when we're doing so many different games and experiences at the same time, I have to pick and choose.
And so maybe when looking at this, having the big helicopter view, right, about running and supporting so many people, right, in delivering so many
Mhm.
experiences at the same time, what are
Yeah,
some of the things that you have learned that you would say, well, this is actually valuable for other people that are still trying to maybe grow in the space?
yeah. I mean, if the key thing, if you're serious about doing mixed reality, if you're serious about doing virtual reality, the the key thing is always to start with the body, because that's the point of the medium. Um, a lot of people look at VR and they say, "Oh, I guess it's cool because it's got 3D." Like, yeah, it has 3D, but 3D isn't really the stereo view isn't really the strength of it. The strength is that it creates an illusion that your body is part of the simulation. Either your body is in a virtual space that isn't really here, or if you're doing augmented reality, that there are like virtual objects around your body in your physical space. And if the experience has nothing to do with your body, why are you doing it in VR? There probably isn't a good reason for that. And you can look and you can see that if you look at successful VR games, it's almost always that way. They all involve like physical action of your body in some important way.
It's a very interesting thing, actually, because, as silly as it might sound, I never thought about it. It's not really about the 3D space. We always refer to that as the 3D space, but you're absolutely right. It's really about the body interacting with that, right? It's
Yeah, yeah. It's the part that's unique, that no one's ever watching television and is suddenly concerned that, like, oh, are these things on television in the room with me? No, no one ever thinks that. Like, we don't ever think that. But we see all the time someone's in VR, maybe they're working on some tricky puzzle or something, and we'll see them reach out with their hand and go to lean on a virtual table that's not there. And they intellectually they know it's not there, but their body believes it. Their body is believing in this space that isn't actually here. And that level of immersion is the part that's just absolutely unique to the medium. And so that's what you want to lean in on. And there's a lot of aspects to that, right? Because there's uh there's a lot of different ways that we interact with virtual objects, but then there's also ways we interact socially. Um, if you uh, if you're with another person and they like intersect your space, you feel it because there's a special nucleus in your brain that's all about things that come in closer than arm's reach. And that kind of social presence, that kind of closeness, that kind of intimacy, like, only possible in the XR mediums.
XR, and yet right now, nowadays, we have a lot of talk about porting to the apps to VR, right? In many different ways, the people are thinking and adapting. I think you are one of the great success in a sense, like when we think about Among Us VR
Okay.
and the success that it had, of course, on the
Right.
store, on Quest.
Yeah.
Um, what did it take to port, and the expectation that comes along porting a 2D popular game to the VR? How did it go?
Yeah. So we've looked at a lot of different possible ports and games we could bring into VR, and we've rejected a lot of them. But when the Among Us opportunity came up, at first we thought, well, I don't know. I mean, that's just a 2D game with a lot of little typing, and like, typing is not good and 2D is not good. Maybe that's not going to be a good fit. But as we thought about it, we're like, well, what if we brought it into 3D? Like, how does that work? Is that good? Is that better? What does that have to do with the body? That's always the question. What does that have to do with the body? And we sort of realized two things. First of all, that in Among Us, you do a lot of tasks around the spaceship, and that, okay, we can make those very physical, right? You're pushing buttons, you're pulling levers, you're sliding sliders, you're lifting things. Okay, so that's okay. That uses the body. It's kind of immersive. But then, really, really important is Among Us is a game about people sneaking up on each other. And so it's a game where you literally have to watch your back. And we realized that feeling of like, is there, I have to do this with my hands. Wait, is there someone behind me? Like that ability to kind of, it just felt very natural. And it was something we haven't really seen much in VR. We don't have a lot of VR games where someone sneaks up behind you and you got to kind of watch your back. And it's such a good use of the headset. Not to mention that we watched so many people play Among Us VR. I mean, people play regular Among Us using, they would play on Discord. So they'd be playing, but then they'd be on Discord because they wanted a voice conversation, but there's no voice conversation in the 2D game. And of course, voice conversations are quite natural in social VR. So we saw all those things come together and we said, this feels like a good match. And we started building prototypes and really started to see that, it's a strong match for VR. Not to mention, one of the big trends that we're seeing in the VR space, you look at the success of things like Gorilla Tag, Yeeps, and Among Us VR. Those are very popular with younger players in that kind of 10 to 15 age range. And so again, it's a good match there because that game is a good fit with that age group.
So, of course, Among Us, I wouldn't say it's easy. I mean, it's probably very complicated to build, but to launch it, it's okay. We are launching Among Us in VR. Okay, everybody gets it. Now, what about launching, for example, a new game or a new franchise, something that doesn't have the backing of all that knowledge, of all that branding? How have you done it? Are there some things that you have seen that work better than others?
Yeah, it's anytime you're launching a new game that people aren't familiar with, it's hard. It either has to be to be really successful. It either has to be something that people understand right away. Like, for example, you look at Blade and Sorcery, which it's like, hey, this is the physics-based sword game. Oh, okay. Lots of people are like, oh, I want to do a physics-based sword game. And so, okay, so that one kind of is a match and lines up well. But then you have other games where it can be a harder sell. It's not clear exactly what people want. So it's tough. I mean, you either have to find something that like matches something an audience needs, and then if it goes well, it can end up getting viral and the word starts to spread. But it isn't a piece of cake. But it's not a piece of cake in VR, and it certainly isn't a piece of cake anywhere in the game industry. There are hundreds and hundreds of excellent games that just don't become popular because people can't find them because there's just so much content out in the world.
And this brings me to another question that has to do really with discoverability, and that has to do with the meta store overall. So I was wondering if the merging somehow affected you, or if there is some things that you have seen.
Oh yeah, no, definitely the merging. We knew it was inevitable that it was coming. It happens in every store, right? I mean, most stores in the last 15 years have started out the same way. They start out very curated. You look at Steam. It used to be really hard to get a game before they had the green light process. Getting a game on Steam was like really hard to do. And then they had the green light process. And then it was still hard to do, but less hard. And then they just threw the doors wide. Same thing, the Nintendo Switch started out very curated. Then they threw it wide. And the thing we know is that once the doors are thrown wide, discoverability becomes really hard. The Meta is interesting watching Meta's approaches because first they tried the Oculus Go, and they basically just threw the doors wide, saying more apps in here will be better. That'll be great. But then it wasn't great because a lot of people were buying the Go, saying, "Look, I don't know about VR. Let me see what's in the store." and then they'd try some random stuff, and it would be kind of junky sometimes, and they'd say, "Oh, I guess VR is not good." And so Meta got for the Quest, they got very curatorial and decided that we're only going to allow top stuff in the store, so that if you get a game, you know it's going to be good. And that was great for us because we were making high quality stuff. Like the I Expect You to Die games were in that category. We did Until You Fall, which is a sword fighting game, was there. Lost Recipes, our historical cooking game, a lot of things. And when a store is highly curated, it allows two things. It allows you get featured more strongly, and then it allows you to kind of keep your prices a little higher. That you don't have quite the race to the bottom where everything cascades into free to play. Um, and so for developers, I think that worked well for a long time. But that doesn't need to last forever, and so that we're going through that transition right now. The thing that is unknown, I think, about where the Quest Store is going to end up is we don't know. Will it end up like mobile? Because you could argue, oh, this is like mobile hardware. It's going to end up like mobile, where everything's free to play. And if it's not, that's kind of actually weird. It's if you have a game that's like premium price up front, that's weird. What are you doing? That's the land of mobile. But if you look in the land of Steam and you look in the consoles, that's less that way. Free to play exists there, but it's not the norm. Um, uh, premium prices are still somewhat the norm there. And exactly which way the Quest headset's going to end up is unclear. The fact that the headsets are so popular with younger players, that actually leans a little bit more towards the free to play. They certainly favor the free to play.
Yeah, I mean, I think you made a very good point. I'm not sure if the initial and the investment cost and also the install base is something that a completely free to play system can support, right? Also, building this VR, even a decent experience, is not necessarily like building a mobile app, right? And also, again, the mobile app, you can still leverage the advertisement system, right? So when you have like free to play, you get the ads, you can still monetize on that. So I agree. Probably the age sounds like more skewing that towards that vision of a free-to-play system, but I'm not sure the initial investments as well as the install base could support that.
I don't know. Gorilla Tag's doing okay.
I just wanted to have a quick break to remind you that if you're enjoying this conversation, you should definitely check out the XR AI Spotlight newsletter. By subscribing, you will get weekly interviews like this one directly in your inbox, an app or product I personally have tested and recommend, and access to a list of over 400 mixed reality apps for Quest that you can easily search and filter. Just check the first link in the show description. And now, let's get back to the show. And, here is another point where everybody keeps referring to these one or two games, because there is probably Gorilla Tag and there is Walkabout Mini Golf. Now, every time, does that really make sense to refer to that outlier?
Well, it's a question. It's a question of how far an outlier is it? Because you look at Gorilla Tag, you look at Yeeps. It feels like we're starting to have a trend going that way, and there's a number of others that are going that way. And again, we don't know, is this is this an outlying success or not? It's hard to say. What we can say, what I do feel like is the in the last couple of years, the games that have been most successful, from what we can see, have been either free to play or relatively low priced. Like you look at games like I Am Cat, right? Mm-hmm. Compare that to games at the 30, 40, 50.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like Asgard's Wrath 2, right? Excellent game. It's an incredible game. But I don't know the number of units sold, but I'd be surprised if they were able to make that profitable at this point. So it's a big question, and of course we see this is a whole question about platforms in general in the gaming space. Because you got a game like Fortnite out in the world. Someone plays Fortnite for 400 hours. Well, guess what? That's 40 10-hour games that they didn't buy because they were playing Fortnite instead. And so it could be that the platforms like, you know, Gorilla Tag, Rec Room, VR Chat are going to, or Horizon World even, are going to kind of be the dominant presence long term. Yeah, we're all trying to figure it out. We don't know.
I agree. And I mean, struggling still to get my son to play something else other than Fortnite. You know, that there are story driven games, that there are other things that you can do. No, the only thing is Fortnite is probably cannibalizing indeed, as you mentioned. Other
Yep.
games that I would love to buy him, but he's never going to touch because he's so much into that loop of die and repeat, die and repeat. But I don't want to make this conversation only about games because
Okay.
I know, of course, the Shell Games goes beyond that, right? I mean, you also, for example, work on learning. Maybe you can tell us about that. How do you balance the two things, at least the all the work outside of the meta store, outside of the pure
Oh,
entertainment?
gotcha. Yeah, I mean, we in terms of business model at Shell Games, we think of ourselves as kind of in four different businesses. We do entertainment games, we do educational games, we also do health games, and then we do theme park and museum work. Um, and so the part of the reason we have these different businesses is because we very much have a kind of long-term view. We've been in business for, I guess, 22 years at this point, and been very, very stable. One of my proudest things is, 22 years, zero layoffs in that period of time. And a lot of that comes from being ready to lean with the market. Because if you stick yourself on just one technology or one kind of application, when the market moves, like, you're going to be in trouble. And so we tend to lean into, like, well, whatever's coming next, we make sure that we're going to be experts in that because the market moves, the market changes. And so a great example is when we were started the pandemic, theme park was really big for us. We had three big theme park projects, all very different. And they were probably, I think we had 60% of the studio working on those. It just happened to be one of those times when it was just that just there were just a lot of that work. And then suddenly the pandemic, they all stopped, like, instantly. Like, all of them were halted. And suddenly I had over half the studio with, like, okay, nothing to do. Okay, I better figure something else out. So this is a good time to lean into health games. Everyone's very health concerned. People are at home, so we started leaning more into health, and some of that was in the VR space. So in terms of our balance right now, we are doing a lot in the mixed reality space, but not entirely. We actually, at this point, we have some theme park things that are completely outside of, they're immersive, but not in they're not
Digital.
in they're not in the headset space at all. So we have some of those that we are presently pursuing, and then another big one for us, of course, is AI, because uh, we've always found it important and necessary to be have a strong focus on, well, what's coming next, what's going to be new, what's going to be different. Partly because as an independent studio, that's where your biggest opportunities are, to be in the blue oceans, not in the red oceans. And then also, just because there's just more opportunities, and we can see them, and we can see how important AI is going to be for the whole space in general.
So I want to discuss about AI from two sides. So one being like how it has impacted, if in any way, the way you work as a team, right? The way AI is supporting maybe your workflow, and the other, of course, how you see that implemented in this experience. So would you say that right now you're using more AI, and this can be from marketing, sales, production of assets, ideation. So how has AI so far impacted you as a company?
In terms of our normal pipeline and process, the it's had some minor impact. There are certain places we can streamline things a little bit by using some AI art, generally for generally for sort of internal visualization where you need to do things quickly. In terms of final assets, we haven't really found that to be especially useful yet. But I know I've talked to some folks who are more and more just streamlining and using AI for final assets. We haven't really seen that it's quite at the level that we need yet. But I'm sure that's coming. What we haven't seen is like big changes in the pipeline, just some potential efficiencies where it can kind of save you a little bit of time. Mostly is what we've seen. The opportunity we're more interested in is the types of games that wouldn't be possible without some kind of generative AI. So that's where we're putting a lot of our focus right now.
Can you give us some example?
Let's see. Um, so yeah, one I've talked about a bit is I believe there's going to be a big intersection between mixed reality and AI. And the reason for that is one of the real strengths with mixed reality is the ability for the headset to have awareness of your place in your space, the place that you live. It understands the shape of your room. Where's your floor? Where's your ceiling? Where's your tables? Where's your chairs? Where's the couch? It can start to do room parsing. Right now, it's very human assisted. You're helping it find the boundaries of the couch and the boundaries of the chair, and you're telling it this one's a chair, that's a couch, that's a plant. Okay, that's fine, and that works. That works pretty well. We've been with our Party Versus title, which is a multiplayer party game. We found that to really help the gameplay, and that works fine. Presently, the headsets are generally set up to they assume you're going to stay within your own room. You're not going to wander about your house room to room. Surely that's coming. We're going to see that coming soon. The ability to move freely about your house and maybe even outside your house. So, if we're going to create experiences, game experiences where they take place within your home, they can't be incredibly fixed, right? I can't do level design that like where I lay out a space when the space is your house. So what that requires is a level of improvisation that can only be done with the generative AI, right? So like just as a little example, imagine an experience you put on the headset and you're just looking at your own house and then, oh, ding dong, it's the doorbell. Okay. You go to your front door, you actually open your real front door. Oh, virtual character standing outside. And they say, oh, hey, I need to come in. I've got these groceries. We need to cook something in the kitchen. Oh, okay. They go in. It knows where the kitchen is. It knows its way there. It takes the virtual groceries out, puts them on the counter. It knows where the counter is. It knows where the oven is. It's like virtually opening your oven and putting food in there and starting to cook things while it talks to you about, look, we need to cook these things because, up in your guest room, oh man, there's something horrible up there and we got to prepare these baits. And you and we're going to go up there. We're going to fight this monster that's up there. Like all of that is possible. I really think it's going to be a big genre, probably in the 2030s. I don't know. We sometimes call it just sort of improvisational in-home storytelling, something like that. But I think that kind of thing where these characters are like living in your house and we're making gameplay around that is going to be a real synergy between what AI can do and what mixed reality can do. So there's a lot of things that are changing right now. I mean, the big one has to do with the verbs that we have in games. Traditional video games where you're talking about a controller and a screen, the central activity is run. Run. Never stop running. Run everywhere. Run. Maybe jump, maybe shoot, but mostly run. And in mixed reality, that's not usually how that works. In VR, in mixed reality, running isn't what the medium is the best at. The medium in VR, some of the strongest part are just your ability to manipulate with your hands, and that's That's things that like focus on that kind of manipulation with your hands are really strong. And then when AI starts to come in, that's AI brings the biggest change to games. AR or not AR, whatever. Um, AI changes things so much because historically with video games, everything's about below the neck. Run, jump, punch, kick, all things you do with your below the neck. If you look at movies, there's a lot of below the neck stuff in movies, sure, but there's also talking and persuading and cajoling and seducing and all of these things that are about talking and communication and conversation. And video games have generally been pretty bad at that. What do you picking like A, B, or C in terms of your choices? Um, and we're about to move into this zone where not only can it understand my speech, but it can actually understand my emotional context, right? And it can read my emotions. It can see my face and hear the emotion in my voice. And suddenly we're going to have these conversations are going to be a central part of gameplay. That's new. We haven't, I mean, people who play tabletop role playing games, sometimes that will be a thing for them. But to be able to have that be part of a digital game is relatively new. So there are definitely going to be changes about like what constitutes like this the center of the game. Like what is this game actually
So
about?
you mean indeed it's less about the space where the game is located, but more about what are the actions and that can be made and are unlocked by AI then.
Yeah, because honestly, I'm if what am I trying to say? So mixed reality on its own, you're sort of limited in terms of what you can do with games because if you're doing virtual reality, okay, that's one thing because I have total control of the space and the place and all of that. But when you do mixed reality and everything's happening in your own house, you have a lot of limits. Like, well, there's all these things you can't do. And so there are things you can do, like games that are about manipulating things that are right in front of you. Okay, that's great and that's fine. And that's, I mean, the whole world of board games, for example, lives right there. It's all manipulating things that are right in front of you. Um, but there's an awful lot you can't do. Um, and I think the reason AI is going to be an important part of that is because the ability to have like living characters in your own home that spend time with you, that's going to be one of the big changes in general. We're already seeing it happen now. There's a great New York Times article recently about the amount of time that people spend talking to AI characters, and they were stacking up like things like character AI against TikTok and other Twitter and other social media apps, and the amount of time that people who engage with these virtual characters, the sessions are longer than other types of social media. And it's weird because people don't it's a thing that's happening quietly right now that people don't talk about because they're embarrassed about it, because it's weird to spend that much time like having a verbal or textual conversation with a character. Um, but I think when that starts to come into games, that's going to be the big change. When we look at the difference between um, video games in the 2020s versus video games in the 2030s, it's going to be the presence of these intelligent characters is going to change everything. Chris Swain made this prediction, I think, I want to say 20 years ago. He talked about as soon as you can talk to characters in a way where they act and behave emotionally with emotional intelligence, is going to change games so much. It's going to be like going from silent movies into talkies. And I think that's absolutely right. His prediction was that nobody took silent movies seriously, but as soon as they started to talk, film became the dominant media of the 20th century. He, as he put it, film became the literature of the 20th century. And his argument is that as soon as games start to get emotionally intelligent AIs in them, suddenly games are not going to just be games anymore. They're going to be the dominant medium of the planet Earth, and they will become the literature of the 21st century.
I have one more question about the future, but before I want to look a second at the past before closing out. And the question I have is: so imagine that you would know everything that happened over the past 10 years, right,
Yeah.
in the XR space. Is
Yeah.
there anything that you would do differently?
Yeah, let's see. It's interesting because I've been working in VR for about 30 years now. I started doing research at Carnegie Mellon in the early 90s, and then went into, I was working at the Disney VR studio in the late 90s. So over the last 10 years, so 2015 to 2025,
You know
um,
everything that happened right
yeah,
now. Would you do anything different?
I'm thinking about it. There's definitely parts where I'm like, yeah, wow, we really got that right. I look at our choices with the I Expect You to Die trilogy, like that went great, and we learned an awful lot. Um, yeah, no, back to you look at Gorilla Tag. Um, and looking at the 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 nature of the kind of games that younger people are wanting to play, and the fact that younger people are, when it really started was with when the Quest 2 headset went on sale for that lower price a few years ago. Suddenly we saw this influx of younger players, and I think with the 299 3S headset we're seeing that's just continuing now. I think we probably would have pivoted into that space a little more, because you look like 2015 to 2020, the people playing VR, it was largely, people over the age of 20. And now we're starting to believe more and more that it may be that the majority of VR players are under 14 at this point. And we launched a game this year, for example, Silent Slayer, which is a vampire slaying game, which slants a bit older. And so I think that's the main thing. Is I think we would have tried to get a little more ahead. I wish we'd gotten a little more ahead with the shifting market, that the market is shifting.
I think it's a very fair assessment. Thanks actually for sharing that, because I think a lesson maybe for other folks that are thinking about what to build is that, like, also because you can reskin a game in many different ways, right? Some of the core mechanic could stay, but you can kind of like adjust it to a different age group in many different way. And if let's say we were to jump 3 to 5 years in the future, right?
Yeah.
How do you imagine XR to evolve?
That's a great question. Okay, so if we look 3 to 5 years in the future, I think we're going to start to see experiments with telepresence. And you may have seen some of the demos of Meta's codec avatars. Those are pretty powerful. And it's possible that within the next 5 years, we're going to see avatars that are at that level. And you combine that with mixed reality headsets, and now you're going to have this ability to have people virtually in the room with you, sitting on your couch with you, and when you watch TV, and you just talk to each other while you do that in a really natural way. I um that may be normal within the next 5 years. So that's a big one. I think that sort of virtual telepresence, and we'll see how that goes. That's definitely a big one that I think about. I certainly think we're going to see more and more educational apps, because VR is hard for traditional education because of the way it kind of shuts out the whole world. But for multiplayer mixed reality works much better because you put on the headset, oh, we're still in the room. And now you can have this sort of multiplayer educational space that is cheaper to develop for and then works better in the context of a real classroom. So I think that's another one that I think we'll see pretty meaningfully within the next few years.
And I hope indeed, because I mean, those are both things that expand beyond games, and I think those are going to grow. They will keep drive at least a lot of the headset and user base. But I think, as you mentioned, like use cases for adults, right, being that telepresence aspect, and as well, and expanding beyond games. I think it's something that certainly the industry need. Jesse, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure.
Oh, sure thing. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for listening in. If you like the show, remember to leave a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or a thumbs up on YouTube. It really helps me keep doing this and shine the spotlights on the greatest founders and makers, pushing the boundaries of XR and AI. Also, make sure to check out the show page xraispotlight.com, where you can find more conversation like this one. Till next time.